The spacecraft reached the comet exactly as planned.
Almost everything that threatened it was invisible. By the time anyone on Earth understood how violent the encounter had become, Giotto was already inside a storm no telescope could fully reveal. Its greatest enemy was not Halley's nucleus. It was the cloud around it. Countless grains of dust moving so fast that even something smaller than sand could strike with explosive force. Giotto kept going because turning away was no longer possible.
The countdown to closest approach had become a countdown to survival. Long before the nucleus filled the camera's view, another instrument announced that the spacecraft had crossed an invisible boundary. Tiny impacts began arriving against the protective shield. Each collision lasted only an instant, but together they marked the start of a different environment. The first recorded impact came roughly 122 minutes before closest approach. A microscopic particle slammed into the spacecraft at about 68.4 kilometers per second, vaporizing as it struck the outer aluminum layer of Giotto's bumper shield. On Earth, it appeared only as a small change in the incoming data. The dust count had begun. Giotto's path did not change. The environment did. Every minute carried the spacecraft deeper into Halley's expanding coma, the huge cloud of gas and dust surrounding the comet. Scientists had expected danger. That was why Giotto carried a dual-layer shield, a thin aluminum plate in front of a thicker Kevlar and polyurethane barrier, with empty space between them so incoming particles would break apart before reaching the spacecraft itself. The design accepted that impacts would happen. What nobody knew was how many. The only way to find out was to fly through the cloud. Inside the spacecraft, the camera kept working. Frame after frame traveled back toward Earth. The Halley multicolor camera had been built for this one encounter. The mission depended on it surviving long enough to reveal what no spacecraft had ever seen before: the solid heart of a comet. As the distance dropped below several thousand kilometers, the camera exposed new images. They did not show the bright, icy snowball many people had imagined. Instead, an odd, dark body emerged from the blackness, reflecting less light than coal. The nucleus was almost invisible. Scientists could recognize it because bright jets of dust and gas outlined its shape. Then the pictures began to change. Bright streaks appeared. Flecks of noise spread across the frames. Dust was no longer striking only the shield, it was reaching the camera's external structures, scoring and stripping parts of its protective baffle. Each new image carried a little more damage than the one before it. The camera was still doing its job, but the environment was beginning to erase the instrument while it worked. That made every remaining second more valuable. There would not be another chance. More than 2,000 images eventually reached Earth, including the closest clear view of Halley's nucleus from roughly 1,827 kilometers away. The camera kept transmitting while it could, with only seconds left before a larger impact changed the mission again. The radio signal held steady. Then it disappeared. Just 7.6 seconds before Giotto reached its closest point, about 596 kilometers above the nucleus, a larger dust particle struck the spacecraft. Engineers later estimated that it probably weighed less than 1 gram. At this speed, that was enough. The impact sent a shock through the spacecraft and shifted its rotation just enough to matter. Giotto had maintained contact with Earth by keeping its high-gain antenna pointed with extreme precision. After the collision, that precision was gone. The spacecraft began to wobble, and its antenna swept away from Earth. Across receiving stations in Australia and inside the European Space Operations Center in Darmstadt, the incoming telemetry vanished. Not gradually. Instantly. The displays fell silent.
No one watching them could know whether the spacecraft had broken apart, whether its instruments had failed, or whether it was still flying intact beyond the radio beam. The encounter reached its most important moment at the same instant Giotto could no longer report what was happening. Beyond contact, the spacecraft continued. Its automatic control software began responding to the unexpected motion. Giotto was spinning with a pronounced wobble, unable to hold its antenna toward Earth. Its star tracker struggled after reflective debris and damage disrupted its reference points. Without instructions from the ground, stabilization thrusters fired in timed bursts, using onboard gyroscopes to estimate the spacecraft's motion. Outside, dust continued to strike. Inside, each correction burned a little more fuel and reduced the wobble by a little more. Giotto was no longer fighting for better science. It was fighting to be heard again. 32 minutes passed before the motion settled enough for the antenna to sweep back across Earth's position. Then, almost as suddenly as it had vanished, the signal returned.
The spacecraft had survived.
Engineers examined what Giotto could still report. The encounter had left permanent scars. The camera's optical protection had been deeply damaged by high-speed dust, leaving the instrument effectively blind for future imaging. But its work had already been done. Before the blackout, it had delivered humanity's first close-up views of a cometary nucleus. Those images crossed space only moments before the environment became too violent for the spacecraft to keep speaking. The mission ended with damage, not destruction. That difference mattered. The flight proved that a spacecraft could survive an extremely close passage through a comet's dust environment, even after losing contact during the most dangerous seconds of the encounter. Later comet missions, including Stardust and Rosetta, would be designed with a clearer understanding of that cost, flying through an environment that could not be fully measured until a spacecraft was already inside it. The Halley multicolor camera never recovered its sight. Its final photographs remained intact.